Hello and welcome to The Beat, presented by Spotify and Ad Age. I'm John Dioso, the editor of Ad Age Studio 30. The Beat is a series of live video events, with each episode focusing on how specific verticals are devising creative marketing strategies in the new normal. First two episodes focus on CPG and tech telco. Today, we're going to take a look at the auto industry. In just a moment, I'm going to be joined by Angela Zepeda, Chief Marketing Officer of Hyundai Motor America, Mike Swosey, Director of Client Partnerships Auto at Spotify, and Craig Weingarten, Global Category Development Officer, Automotive at Spotify. But first, a quick look at the latest automotive news. In yet another sign of how much the pandemic has changed life in America, Times Square will be closed to the public this New Year's Eve, but the ball will still drop. Kia Motors announced yesterday that it will transport the 2021 numerals in a Sorrento across the country from its headquarters in Irvine, California, with stops at dealerships along the way until it reaches its final destination in Times Square. The deal with ABC includes an in-show integration that will spotlight the Sorrento road trip, featuring footage of national landmarks, produced in partnership with National Geographic. Next, another example of how brands have reacted to pandemic-altered consumer behavior. For the first time, Honda recently debuted its new Civic, not at an auto show, but on the gaming platform Twitch. The decision to introduce the model on the gaming platform was based not just on the lack of live experiential opportunities, but also on data showing that 2/3 of Twitch users are under the age of 35, an extremely attractive audience for Honda, which markets the Civic to young first-time buyers. Like streaming video, esports and gaming have benefited from the pandemic lockdown. Twitch now draws a total of 17.5 million users a day. Next, a further sign of the auto industry's focus on tech. Ford named a new global CMO just before Thanksgiving, tapping eBay's North American Chief Marketing Officer, Susie Deering. The hire was seen as a signal that Ford intends to bolster its tech expertise as it increasingly competes with Silicon Valley firms like Tesla, Uber, and Lyft. And finally, speaking of tech, we like to think that we're futurists at Ad Age and at The Beat. Automotive News reported in November that Hyundai was in talks to buy robot maker Boston Dynamics, the geniuses behind Spot. You remember Spot, the dog-like four-legged robot that is either the future of industrial robotics or, depending on your alarmism, the harbinger of a Black Mirror-like robot apocalypse. Auto industry observers speculate that the potential acquisition will make the walking cars that Hyundai unveiled at CES 2019 closer to reality. Let's take a quick look at Hyundai Elevate. Very cool, and that's not scary at all. Okay, when we return, we'll be joined by Angela Zepeda of Hyundai and Mike Swosey and Craig Weingarten of Spotify. But first, here's a look at some other high-tech from Hyundai, introduced during the Super Bowl back in February. YouTube really recently listed this spot as the third most watched ad of the year. Who could forget? Smart Park.
Oh, look at this guy. Hey, Rachel, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
He's not getting that car in there.
No, sir.
Look at these two troublemakers.
Hey, Johnny, how are you?
Wicked car. Is that new?
Yeah, it's a Sonata. Let me pack it.
Oh, you're not fitting your car in there.
Chris, stop being a smarty pants, all right? Look who's got Smart Pack.
Smart pack?
Just hit the clicker, car packs itself.
It's smart.
It's wicked smart. And I can pack it anywhere.
How about Dorchester?
Packed it.
Foxborough.
Packed it.
The garden?
Packed it.
Saugus?
Packed it.
Swampscott?
Revere?
The harbor?
Are you kidding me? I packed it and then unpacked it.
You unparked it?
Kid.
Game changer.
All right. Who could forget that? All right, if you're just joining us, this is The Beat. I'm John Dioso, the editor of Ad Age Studio 30, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Angela Zepeda, the Chief Marketing Officer of Hyundai Motor America. Hi, Angela. Mike Swosey, Director of Client Partnerships of Auto at Spotify, and Craig Weingarten, Global Category Development Officer of Automotive at Spotify.
Yeah.
Angela, Mike, and Craig, welcome. Before we get started, Angela, if we have time at the end of the show, I hope you can tell me when I'm going to get my walking car. because, I was promised a jetpack by Sci-Fi when I was a kid, and I'm still disappointed I never got that. So I'm going to have to demand that I get that walking park.
Well, I hope it's within our lifetime. So more than we all think.
All right. But for now, let me just say that cars and audio have always been a marriage made in heaven. There are so many classic songs that are specifically about cars or driving. One of my favorites is Tom Petty's Running Down a Dream. The very first words are, "It was a beautiful day, the sun beat down. I had the radio on, I was driving." It just evokes the open road, freedom, the American dream. But that has not been the experience for most people this year, as we all know. Mike, I mentioned in the news segment how everyone seemed to have leaned in hard to streaming video and esports during quarantine. How would you say auto brands are positioned in 2020 to bring their story to life via audio?
I think it's really interesting, right? Because of the importance always of visual, right? Of showing metal for auto brands. It's always been just integral to their marketing. But now more than ever, you've got screen fatigue that has set in. I think we can all attest to that, right? I mean, we're sitting on a virtual panel right now, right? But people are really turning to audio as an escape, right? They're looking to get away from their screens, find ways to connect with content, do things that are just a little bit different for them. And the way that they're doing that is by streaming music, by connecting with their favorite podcast. And it's in those screenless moments that really present a huge opportunity for auto brands to connect with consumers in a really intimate, unique way. And do it in a really authentic way. And what's great about audio is that it is really have the ability to personalize those messages. I'm sorry for the dog barking upstairs. But I think that's what's really just so unique about audio, and the way that auto brands have leaned in is through that personalization. And that's whether that's, using their first party data to segment audiences and tell stories in a different way, or leaning into the wealth of data that Spotify has to help understand, moods, moments, mindsets, and tailor creative specifically to those users in those moments based on the devices that they're listening to. It starts to become much more powerful and a way to shift away from that, purely visual message.
Great. And Angela, with that in mind that Mike just mentioned, can you address that, but also frame it in, what's changed in 2020 for the auto industry in general and Hyundai in particular? And can you just address a little bit of what Mike just brought up about the personalization that comes through audio and any potential activations that you've had?
Yeah, it's been a strange year. We've made a lot of changes, and connecting with consumers in a new and fresh way is what the year has been all about. And for us, as an automotive brand, we have a lot of channels at our disposal. We produce a lot of content, but making it personalized and showing up where our consumers are was most important to us. And so we really had to rethink, I think, a more traditional approach, especially when it came to like a car launch, how we were going to do something in a big way that really connected in a very fresh and very powerful way where there was real relevance and resonance. And so, we've looked at things like audio with a new, fresh perspective where, to Mike's point, traditionally, how do you show beautiful sheet metal? And then how do you maybe tell your story in a way that hasn't been done before? And so, our activation with Spotify this year was very exciting for us because it was a new way for us to think about this medium and do it in a way that I think is really deeply engaging and made it personalized. And I think really helped draw, consumers in. So for us, it's been exciting to look at new ways just to take advantage of what's available and how to do it in a way that hasn't been done before.
That's great. I want to hear a little bit more about that activation that you did with Spotify. Before we do, I just want to shout out some of the people who joined us. Thank you so much for joining us. Alex, Jorge, Adam, Michelle, Martin, Sean, Alessandro, Patricia, Ashley, and Dave Perry from Michigan, and Raval Reyes from New York. Thank you, guys. So Angela, please tell us a little bit more about that activation. It was across platforms and media, right?
Yeah. Well, we love Spotify. A huge audience for millennials. And we've been talking to Spotify for quite a while and have been wanting to work with them in a new way. And it just was the right opportunity this last fall, just a month ago, we launched our brand new Elantra, which is very attractive for millennials. Not everyone wants an SUV. And so for millennials who were looking for a car, we wanted to show them that this was an amazing vehicle that had a lot of tech that maybe you didn't know and expect. And so, it was just the right time to work with Spotify. And we wanted to do it in a way where we could tap into things like music, which is huge for our brand, and use artists. We used Interscope artists to help tell our Elantra story. I think that's one of the things I liked best about this activation was that we didn't just put a logo or just showed our, talked about the Elantra or talked about features. We wanted to be part of the story. So we had a microsite. We used also podcast and video to bring the story to life. We have ads that are running on other podcasts that drove consumers to find out about the microsite and to learn more about the car. So it really was a 360-degree activation with sort of audio at its core. And so for us, it's been very exciting. We feel like it's been a real winner for us, and it's just a new and fresh way to connect like we haven't before. But it's had all the dimensions like some of our other channels have given us. So we're very excited about it. They've been wonderful partners through this, coming up with this unique activation.
So now, Craig, from the Spotify side, as Angela was just talking about going for a newer audience and trying to appeal to the audience via audio, given millennials' historic antipathy to driving and auto brands, what's changed in their lives and economic situations to warrant their auto brands focus on them as the new generation of car buyers? Can you relate to that a little bit?
Yeah, like you said, it wasn't that long ago that people thought millennials were never going to drive a car and they weren't going to get into car ownership. But what we found was, millennials are the largest generation group in history, not only by population. So what we found is they're incredibly diverse as well, not just in demographics, but in life stage. So we have millennials are getting their first car or getting their first job. They're getting married. They're moving out of cities into the suburbs in their first house. They're having their first child, or they might even be having multiple children. Each of those life stages requires a car. And so we think that this generation is really prime in their car buying experience and the moment that car companies should be messaging them.
Can we talk a little bit, and anybody can weigh in on this, and Angela or Mike, you could weigh in on this as well. We're just talking about how the things have changed so much during the pandemic, and we're talking about a new audience because they're coming of age. But how much has the pandemic itself really impacted that audience and your plans for what you guys want to do? So one, your marketing plans that you guys are doing in partnership over at Spotify, but also for a big brand like Hyundai. And anyone, Angela, go ahead.
I'll be happy to jump in. The pandemic, as weird as it's been, and how horrible it's been in so many ways, I think it's also been a way to, rethink life. And for a lot of people, and maybe millennials in particular, who might have found themselves in like an urban setting where public transportation, for example, was their regular way of life to get back and forth. Suddenly they couldn't even get into public transportation or didn't feel comfortable doing it to even get like basic goods and services, or things that they needed to bring into their home as people were sheltering in place. And so that became a new pain point. And then as the pandemic, has lingered on, people are going stir crazy at home. And so if you didn't have a car, maybe you were using subscription services or any other kind of service to, do part-time use of a car. But then it also had this pandemic overlay of, was that really the safest thing? And so we saw a ton of shopping activity through the summer, even through the spring when it first hit. And regions like the East that were pretty much locked down for the first couple of months, let's say 3 to 4 months as the pandemic started, when it started opening up, we saw a huge uptick in our sales. So that just showed that there was a lot of activity with a lot of millennials and a lot of people who were just rethinking car ownership in a new and fresh way that I think really changed the paradigm to where we thought it was going previous to the pandemic.
Go ahead, Mike.
Kind of speaking to that, was really interesting. Through data signals, like we are able to identify, people streaming in cars as well as other devices. But once going back to March, right, when everything basically shut down, we saw obviously this massive dip in in-car listening, and we saw a spike in at-home listening, right? And just based on the way that people's daily lives have changed, But now, as things sort of opened up a bit more, those in-car streaming levels are back to above pre-COVID levels, which is awesome to see. And then that at-home listening sort of continues to rise as well. So I think there's a lot of these new habits that have been formed by people over the past 9 months that, it'll be interesting to see how those things stick. Once, vaccine is out, people are out doing a bunch more. But I think what is interesting is that, getting in the car and just getting away, getting out of your house, going for a drive, road trip, whatever it might be, that became an escape. Your car became a sort of a safe place, and place to unwind, listen to your favorite tunes, listen to your favorite podcasts, and just I know for me, like I've never relished just like getting in the car and going to the grocery store, more than I have recently. So
doing a lot of errands, aren't you? Before we go to Craig, actually, we had an audience question that was similar to that one that I just asked, so I want to bring that one up. And it's from Jens Jenkner, as a regional brand manager at Volkswagen, who asks, what's your take on how COVID-19 has changed the way of storytelling and advertising? So again, back to the COVID-19. And in general, what are the trends of the right formats and attributes for storytelling? Craig, do you want to weigh in on this? And maybe Angela could also come back in on the back end of it?
Yeah, I think the first part is what we were talking about, that these are life stage moments for millennials. And so it actually falls right in line with what we're doing here, and that's there's some screen, they're not watching TV as much, or they're not watching the screen as much, and audio gives us the opportunity to tell the story for this automotive in their ears, and they can hear that at any moment of the day. So it doesn't matter if they're at work or if they're working out or if they're cooking dinner, audio's there, and that is a real, it's a COVID-19 piece, but it's also going to live. We believe it's going to live there afterwards. So,
and Angela, tell us a little bit more about the storytelling from maybe from the other activation, but anything else that you have done this past year, or maybe something you have in the works.
Well, there's always lots of things in the works. Next year will be a very busy year. But, storytelling is a huge part of how to bring your brand to life and to connect with consumers. And we're always looking at ways to do that. I think one of the things that happened with Spotify also that was really interesting was that we wanted, of course, it was for our Elantra launch, but we didn't want it to be all about Elantra. And the way that we used our Interscope artists as sort of our spokespeople, so to speak, in this format, even with the video with Lauren Haregi, she really brought a story to life of her city of Miami and all of her favorite places that she liked to visit. And I think it just really draws the consumer in a new and fresh way. And for us to tell that story about Elantra, but do it in a storytelling manner that had someone else speak in on our behalf, I think is just the really good content that people are looking for. And we hope they connect with us as a brand and ultimately buy us when they're ready. But in the meantime, I also want to entertain, and I want to just be a brand that shows up where they are and gives them some entertainment or information that they find helpful, useful, or fun. And so I think that's one of the freshest ways we've done storytelling, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
And I just want to take another break and just say, if anybody joined us late, again, this is The Beat, presented by Spotify and Ad Age. And here with Angela, I'm John Dios, the editor of Studio 30. I'm here with Angela from Hyundai, Craig, and Mike from Spotify. And we're talking about what's going on in the audio industry, all the learnings we've had from the past year and going forward. A little shout out to Rick. Yes, we love the Les Pauls. And I think Mike promised to give me one after this. Thank you. So I'm totally down with it. I accept gifts. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever.
There's one there for each of us, right?
Yeah, I like that. 3. Perfect.
Everyone gets a parting gift.
All right, going back, we've obviously been so focused on the pandemic and we're so sick of it, but it's just it's where we are right now in our world, where we are in life. And, Craig and Mike, either one of you can jump in. Maybe Craig, you can. As brands like Hyundai are showing, they still need to reach consumers in key moments, right? Or when they're in a specific mood. What are you seeing from auto clients, not just Hyundai, but any others, as they adjust to continue to reach consumers in critical moments? It doesn't have to be, because when you're thinking about the pandemic, it's not just that existential dread that we have there. They're just real practical things like Mike's dog barking, or somebody unplugging the Xbox or whatever. So yeah, please weigh in on that.
Mike, you want to go?
Yeah. Look, I think the fact that, there are all these different different moments that happen throughout people's day, right? And it's micro moments, it's macro moments, right? Whether that's how you're sort of running your day, from getting ready in the morning to, your meal prep and, putting your kids to bed to, big tentpole things that continue to happen throughout the world. Spotify really is at the center of all of it, right? It's at the center of people's lives, like in their day to day, and it's at the center of culture when we get a little bit bigger. And what's really interesting is that you see culture amplified on the platform in a major way. Whether that's through big moments like Black Lives Matter, or the sleep playlist that you play for your kid. Everybody's turning to Spotify to soundtrack their lives and understand what's going on around them. So it's because of those moments that we can lean in and advertisers can lean in and to personalize messaging, to be able to deliver messages in those particular moments and speak to users during those moments. So
just to add, as I was saying earlier, audio gives us the opportunity to talk to people at really all times of the day. So you don't have to be in front of a screen to hear it, obviously. So you could be, waking up in the morning, you can be driving to work, you could be working out, you could be sitting at your desk, whether, during COVID or when we're back to the office at some point with headphones on. These are, you could be cooking. There are these moments all throughout the day, and streaming intelligence tells us these things. So it gives advertisers like Angela the ability to craft a message based on that moment rather than just crafting some 35,000 foot message and hoping it resonates at that point with that person.
And I mentioned before how streaming video and esports really took off at the beginning of the pandemic. And we were talking a little bit about consumer habits before. Just speaking personally, being a big podcast listener and obviously music fan, a lot of that took place during my commute to go from Brooklyn to Manhattan, to go to the office and home again.
Yeah.
And I lost basically an hour and a half of listening time every day at the beginning of this. And I was not used to just listening, sometimes doing whatever, you're adjusting to whatever your working from home situation is. What have you seen? I mean, did things drop off at the beginning? Where are listening numbers now?
Mike talked about it a little bit earlier, but sure, in the United States, March and April came and people were locked down. So you just saw an absolute drop in people listening to audio in car. And that's just the fact. And as we started coming out of lockdown, as the warmer weather hit with most of the country, as people started understanding and getting involved in the new normal for them, we started seeing that pop back up. But at the same time, in car, at home, and connected speakers was going too. So you had that mix of people who were utilizing their car, whether it was to go to work at their normal 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, or different usage of car. We saw that rise, but we also saw a stabilization and a continuing rising of in-home connected speaker.
Yeah, and even with podcasts too, we've continued to see listenership on the platform grow, month over month. We've obviously been making a big investment there with content acquisitions, tech acquisitions, but from the standpoint of listening, it was just about that shifting of the behavior, right? Of podcasts being the thing you did during your commute to I don't commute anymore, but I still want to listen to podcasts. So where does it fit into my day? And so you see some of that happening in the morning sort of routine, or maybe as you wind down your day. But definitely just the shift in when and how people are consuming. But the overall listenership of the platform has never been stronger and continues to grow on a quarter over quarter basis.
Great. I think we have time for another audience question. Let's see if we have one. There are a lot of great questions. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us and sending in those questions. We have that other one teed up. Let's see. It's not up yet. No, Dead Space is bad. There you go. Matt, what have you and Hyundai, and I assume this is for you, Angela, or Miss Zepeda, as people have been calling you.
I know.
What have you and Hyundai been doing marketing-wise to make up for the lack of events and experiential opportunities in this pandemic? It's a great question.
That's a great question. Well, it hurt. So because we were very much a brand that wanted to be out where our consumers are and let them see us as a brand and see the product. I mean, that's just a huge part of it. But we had to get a little clever this year. Auto shows completely went away. We've done a lot of virtual things for more of that side of the business, which has been, it's been good. We've been able to get through it. But we did do some things that were experiential that I think really helped keep us as front and forward as we could. One was we do have with our N line a motorsport series with Brian Herta. There were races that were still happening, not so much with consumers at the actual track, but we have a partnership with Motor Trend that helped bring that through life again through a virtual experience. We've been part of, as a brand, with a lot of conferences that went online that just brought storytelling and what we're doing as a brand to life. And then just recently with Hispanic Heritage Month, we did an activation in Los Angeles where we took well-known Latin artists in Los Angeles and did a drive-through where they could see that art in sort of a back lot that we turned into this great experiential environment that was free. And it was just a way for people to get out and experience something that, you did it in your car and you drove through, but it was still a lot of fun. So we'll continue to push on those kinds of ideas going into 2021.
That's great. And also when going back to the My City Unlocked campaign,
Mm-hmm.
just the very fact of going to the cities and people being locked in, but then hearing the stories of these other places where they aren't and can't be, but may want to go eventually when this all ends. It kind of is a virtual experiential thing. I think Kia's, their whole campaign now going across country to deliver the numbers for 2021 is kind of similar. The fact that they're documenting that video and then showing it, it's another way to kind of make up for the lack of actual experiential while we're going through this.
I think that's absolutely right. I think people are feeling a little shuttered in and a little locked up. And I think anything you can do to help bring some other place to life that just, I think reminds everyone that there's still a lot of the world out there that we all can't wait to get back out to see. And if we can bring it to life somehow, even virtually, I think it's a welcome thing to watch. So.
Great. Okay. And we just have a little bit of more time left. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the beat with Angela, Mike, and Craig. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity. We didn't really talk about this ahead of time, but I just want to let you guys, we're at the end of the year and it's been a hell of a year. It's been a hell of a year. And this whole episode series has actually been about looking back at what we've learned during this singular moment in history and in our own lives. What have we learned from then? So looking forward, what are your predictions and do you have any New Year's resolutions? We'll start with Craig.
So first off, just as a shout out to Spotify Wrapped, yesterday my Wrap told me that there were 67 months in 2020. You were listening, I think the amount of listening I did fortified that. I actually
What was your top song? Wait a minute. What was your top song?
That's private. We can't.
Oh man,
share that out.
I will share this with you. Okay, I'm not embarrassed. I miss going to see Hamilton. Had a couple opportunities to see it a couple times over the years. Didn't see it. Finally saw it when it was on Disney Plus. And of course, I got obsessed with it and listened to it literally every single day. So if you look at my playlist, it's all indie rock and the soundtrack from Hamilton. So 4 of the top 5 songs on my list are Hamilton songs.
So as far as forecasting or what I think is going to happen in 21, I think streaming audio is actually going to take. It's not a bubble because of COVID. I think that we're going to go into a flu season. People are still going to be locked down. I think audio, just people more than accept. People actually start really diving into streaming audio, and the screen time is real. People being sick of screen time, not enough content there, and they use streaming audio for more and more parts of their day.
Okay, great. Mike next.
My prediction is that we get a vaccine and everybody gets out to getting back to their lives. That's where I want to go. Maybe it's just
that's a good wish. We can all wish for that.
Thinking than a prediction, but gosh, I hope so. But I think that from the standpoint of consumer behavior, I think that as you look at younger audiences, that engage really deeply within Spotify. I think from an automotive perspective, we're seeing that shift of people being younger, buying their first cars, things that it's just the idea of freedom that owning a car affords you. And I think that we'll start to see those younger audiences continue to be more important for auto advertisers, and then leaning into Spotify as as a core platform where those users are will be really important.
Angela.
Oh my gosh, I think the pandemic has changed the way I think people just thought about and lived their lives like they had before. I know personally it was a rushed, hectic, crazy life. You could barely pay attention to what was right in front of you. And I think we've just noticed that people have taken a new appreciation for whatever it is that they're doing. Whether it's spending more time with family or doing those things with family, taking time to actually, personally, I have a resolution this year. I am going to learn Spanish. I've been working on it all this year. I'm getting better and better at it. And so I really want to speak it fluently. I think people are just taking time. I heard an interesting statistic about out of home, which a lot of people might think might have been dead because people weren't traveling. Well, people did want to get in their cars and take like weekend drives, and they're actually noticing advertising more and taking in that advertising and remembering it. And I don't know if it's because the roads are less crowded or people are just looking at things in a new, fresh way. I just think things that were kind of old and maybe we thought weren't important, I think that they're all still important. And I think there's just a renewed sense of, if we survive this year, we can move forward with anything. And there's just a new appreciation for, I think, all things. So I think as a brand, we're going to want to tap into that and just show up in a very fresh and genuine way.
All right. I think that's the perfect place to wrap it up. I just want to thank, before I go, I want to thank Angela Zepeda of Hyundai, Mike Swozey and Craig Weingarten of Spotify for joining me, all our friends and partners of Spotify, and most of all, everyone in the audience who took the time out of your busy day to join us. And before we go, play us out, let's take a look at Lauren Jaregi's video in My City Unlocked. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
I'm really grateful to the city because it helped shape me into the woman I am today. My name's Lauren Jaregui. I'm gonna take you through Miami. Familiar streets and sounds and family. It helped me create a very strong foundation. I mean, La Carreta is like a staple in my life. I used to go with my family all the time. And yeah, tostadas, café con leche, tostones. I love driving out here, visiting places that I knew as a child and discovering new places as an adult. Books and Books is this amazing, quirky, cute spot. Reading is such a huge part of my life. It's like when I went to a toy store as a little kid, that's how I feel as an adult in a bookstore. Exhale one time, align your breath with mine. Under an open sky we fly. The water brings me serenity. If anything is bringing me down energetically, if I feel a heaviness, it always replenishes me. Dale lento, tócamela más lento. El ritmo me está encendiendo y sé que te está quemando. I love Miami. I love that this place is my home. My reset. Come back to myself.